Among Us and Fortnite, two of the biggest games not just currently, but of all time, existing in their own niches of relatively new genres. Battle Royale and social deduction games either did not exist or were not popular very recently. Both are free, both can be played at home or on mobile devices, and both have kids as their largest demographic. But it's worth remembering that the pool of gamers is on the scale of billions. They aren't really edging into each other's territory all that much, until the surprise announcement of Fortnite Imposters, where Epic seemingly decided sharing that gold medal podium placement wasn't enough. I'm making this video unscheduled, putting it out there as a critique and a bit of a rant. I started putting this together yesterday and decided I should sleep on it. Coming back to it today, I see more of an opportunity to open some larger conversations and look at some not often talked about parts of the game industry. So yeah, there's still ranting, but I tweaked it to hopefully steer things in a more positive direction and get people thinking about some important topics. Let's jump back to 2007. We have a teenager making a free online game about a stick figure crossing a pit and failing. This becomes the Henry Stickmin series, one of the most beloved Flash games of all time, something that had newfound success only 1 year ago. Eventually, this solo developer partnered up with a college buddy to put out some other free game ideas. The two decide to make their version of the live party game Mafia with inspirations of John Carpenter's The Thing. They put that out into the world in 2018 and move on to continue making small projects, planning for their next venture. Nearly 2 years later, their game goes viral and becomes literally one of the biggest games on the planet. We see these humble beginnings of one developer, eventually two, making games with the same software that produced things like Kitty Cannon, now have sold literally millions of copies. It's one of the biggest success stories of all time, and it's something indie developers are going to be telling to their grand developers 30 years from now. This little project with Flash game origins, made by such a small team, reached heights that topped Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox, and even outlived viral contemporaries like Fall Guys. That's one of the single most amazing stories in all of indie gaming, if not gaming as a whole. They're far from the first solo developer or two-man team to find success, but never like this. The timing was perfect, the stars aligned, and now we see these little faces in absolutely everything every day of our lives. The Among Us game model is relatively simple. Log in with 10 players, run through the map to complete tasks while the imposters attempt to sabotage the facility while stealthily eliminating the other players. Imposters must be rooted out and voted off for the good players to win. Meanwhile, the imposters jump around the map and try and stop them from completing their goal. Communication is key, and that constant uncertainty and that intrigue of needing to suss out the sus players is what keeps people coming back. And now the gameplay of Fortnite Imposters is the exact same. Just rewind this video like 30 seconds. It's the word for word the same. I even carefully avoided identifying words, but was able to leave in the word imposters. It is that literal. There was no shame in the degree to which Among Us was ripped off. Seriously. They call them agents instead of crewmates, and it takes place in something other than a spaceship, but they sure made it look a heck of a lot like a spaceship. And that's it. Those are basically the only differences. Obviously, the 3D art and perspective changes things, but it's the same game. From InnerSloth founder Puffballs United, we didn't patent the Among Us mechanics. I don't think that leads to a healthy game industry. Is it really that hard to put 10% more effort into putting your own spin on it though? I'm sure the InnerSloth team is beyond frustrated and want to prepare a full diplomatic response to this. But one major thing they have been clear about in the hours after this announcement is not wanting to gatekeep game mechanics. Their game is based on Mafia. There's no complete ownership of the genre of social deduction. From community director Victoria Tran, it would have been really cool to collab. This imposter mode is so identical to the core identity of Among Us that many publications ran headlines assuming that there was an actual collaboration between these devs. It was so unbelievable that Epic would copy them that directly. But copying elements so literally is a huge problem. We had Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War announce their double agent mode only a week prior, but they added the role of the investigator, completely changed the setting, and added weapons and tools, decisions that root it in the world of Call of Duty and distance it from Among Us. It was different enough to not leave a bad taste in my mouth and to not really warrant a response. Game mechanics, fine, those shouldn't be gatekept, but at the very least, even different themes or terminology makes things more interesting. There is the argument that nothing is original, and every piece of media is the sum of its influences. Fortnite itself is this natural progression of the FPS craze, which itself turned into battle royales, which then became this. But it added and expanded the genre in ways that made it a unique experience. On the indie side of things, we have older titles like Town of Salem and Spy Party, as well as some post-Among Us social deduction games like Project Winter, Paper Pirates, Agru, or the upcoming Suspect Mystery Mansion, each of which differs in massive ways within the social deduction formula and always offering up something new. If you were the biggest Among Us fan on the planet and went and bought any of those games right now and know approximately what you're getting, but if you started trying to blindly play them, you wouldn't have a clue what's going on. Whereas if you were to go install Fortnite Imposter, I think you could pretty easily skip the tutorial. And that's not a good thing in this scenario. While I'm on the subject of innovative indies, you should check out my recent video where I recommend 50 indie titles you've never heard of. Forming a hate mob against Epic isn't going to solve anything. The best thing you can do is skip over Fortnite Imposters and support original games. Give that video a watch and I guarantee you'll find at least one game that you're compelled to wishlist if not buy. Now, indies aren't immune to this. There are hundreds of Among Us clones out there, both shovelware and games that do have some genuine effort put into them, in at least some way. And there are some super high-profile cases out there of supposedly indie developers stealing from one another in some pretty shady ways. This often flirts with these gray areas, and rarely is anything inarguably malicious, but it does happen. If you want to go deeper down that thread, I recently had a video talking a lot about inspiration versus ripoffs, specifically looking at how Angry Birds copied the Flash game hit Crush the Castle. That was a relatively small developer borrowing from a relatively small Flash game developer. But even in that very one-to-one case in terms of gameplay, it's still fairly commonly accepted that enough was changed and that development took place in this fair game territory where nobody felt particularly wronged. Jealous, perhaps, that their game's clone found the viral success it did not, but there doesn't seem to be any major ill will. The idea of one of the biggest developers on the planet deciding that their game, that is one of the biggest games on the planet, needed a social deduction game mode to reach new audiences and tap into that craze is no surprise to me. Your golden goose keeps laying eggs, why not find a new goose or fatten up the one you have? I mean, Fortnite did launch as a horde survival game and then pivoted to Battle Royale when that became popular. So I shouldn't be all that surprised that they're yet again chasing that popularity. The way they went about it is so wrong. I saw someone point out the way Epic Games and the Fortnite devs can seemingly so easily make contacts with Disney and other massive companies, and always seem to make those important collabs happen, but couldn't reach out to an indie dev who has made one of the most popular games on their service? That feels like a fault of the industry at large, that we really separate indies and AAA to that extent, when they're all just games. One game doesn't have less merit because it was made by less people with less money and with less crunch. That's a huge part of why I love indies, is how much they have to offer without any of that. Doesn't that really even the playing field? The best examples of that I can think of are the Sonic Mania team, being allowed to make an official Sonic game while starting as fan game creators, or Nintendo allowing the Crypt of the Necrodancer to become Cadence of Hyrule. We don't need to pit indies and AAA against one another. There's so much room for collaboration, and that can intermingle in ways that would benefit games both big and small, adding new perspectives to it, as well as some new resources. The fact that they took this lazy route, changed nothing, added nothing, and leaned on the InnerSloth and Among Us brand by calling it Imposters is the part I take issue with. It was almost inevitable that these AAA developers would put out some version of an Among Us clone. It didn't matter if that was within Fortnite or an original IP. The second MOBAs are popular, everyone has a MOBA. Trading card games, everyone has one of those. Battle royales, auto chess games, if something catches on, others will make their own version. That's kinda how it's always worked. But if they've really insisted on stealing straight out of the mouths of the little guy, the least they could have done is add some value to it. Or heck, attempt to work directly with InnerSloth. They for sure would have gone for it. The two biggest games right now, working together? It doesn't matter if you don't care about either game. That's a win for Epic, InnerSloth, gamers, and indie developers worldwide. You're adding rather than subtracting. We didn't work with Epic on it, although we would have loved to collab, and found out about it the same time as everyone else. We've been working on some really cool collabs with other indie developers that we can hopefully share soon though. This sort of low-effort, creatively bankrupt approach to attempting to get into the social deduction genre is super disheartening. In Victoria's own words, it feels like a powerless, LOL, what's the point anymore, of making our own stories or content. And I agree with that 100%. The gaming space is near infinitely large, and we should always be working to lift each other up as much as possible. Games are rarely completely original, but that doesn't mean that they should make no attempt to stand on their own. The scale of this really hurts. A company that large deciding to so blatantly steal from a company so small. Sure, they're worth millions now, and the team is growing, but it still comes down to a couple real people who shared their passion project with the world, offered up something original that we all said yes to, and found that much-deserved success that so rarely finds its way to the indie scene. I've seen people say that this is all okay because the mode is temporary. That argument is just bad. If I start kicking you in the shin, is it okay because at some point I plan to stop? Or flip the perspective. What if I released Fort Day, my new fort building battle royale, available for 1 month only? Do you think Epic would ever let that slide? Certainly not. It's an insult to their work and an obvious exploitative cash grab. They probably never could have made it a permanent mode because they'd risk getting sued. Now in the time it would take to put together a legal case, they can just pull the game and run away from it, having already made their money. And if the reason it comes across as such a ripoff is because they didn't have the time to make something more unique, that's their issue, and yet another reason they probably should have partnered with InnerSloth. A special event integrating Among Us into Fortnite? That was a win-win, and what we got instead was a win and someone who was never asked to participate. I won't condemn Epic forever for this. While I don't play it, I think Fortnite has value, and that their storefront has a lot of pro-developer and pro-gamer systems in place that add some much-needed competition to the game distribution market. People like to hate on them for that. I like the Epic Game Store and what they've done with it. But with them touting all this indie friendliness, only to pull these shenanigans, it leaves me asking, who is the real imposter among us? I don't know if I should be proud or ashamed of that corny wrap up there. After spending a bit of time with it, Puff shared this tweet. At the end of the day, I'm just gonna keep making the games I want to make. Everything else is just noise. What do you guys think of the whole situation? Do you think it's shady or distasteful? Do you see it as overblown? Are you going to play Fortnite Imposters? Are you happy it's similar to Among Us or wish it was something different? I don't know, there's a million different angles we could talk about this. Please don't stir up any hate mobs. No one here deserves it. If you do take it personally or disagree with it, then yeah, the best thing you could do is take some time away from Fortnite. Maybe don't play the imposter mode, go take a look at that 50 indie games video, and try your hand at something other than the most popular games on the planet. Maybe you'll find something you like. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.